The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker is one of the most interesting titles in the entire franchise. Similarly to my Majora's Mask review, this is one of the hardest videos for me to make, because The Wind Waker is universally loved by almost everyone, and as someone who grew up playing it, I also happen to love this game, henceforth the title of this video. However, while The Wind Waker has very high highs and a lot of them, it also has some very low lows, which is why we will be examining it today in this video. Before we begin, a little bit of backstory. I got The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker HD for my Wii U in 2015, and I was thrilled about it. At this time, I was only 10 years old and still relatively new to the Zelda franchise, but playing through this game was just lovely, and not really paying too much attention to the story allowed me to feel like this was the perfect game for me. And now, growing up, it still is that perfect game, as this story is actually very mature, but also still can be enjoyed by a younger audience, but also enjoyed arguably even more by an older audience. The introduction to this game might be the best introduction to any Zelda game in the entire franchise. Just a title scroll, simple imagery, and a perfect layout to the story for this game. It almost paints Hyrule in this dark past that is perfect for this world, because right when we are introduced to it, with Link taking a nap, as he should, it's colorful, bright, and lovely, but the hidden secrets that are happening beyond in this game really do come in to linger. And this is perfect, allowing the gameplay, story, and pacing all to work together in sync. And I gotta say, one of my favorite parts about this game has to be the gameplay. The sound effects that play whenever you hit an attack is just so satisfying, and especially when you string a combo together, it's really nice, and I wish that more Zelda games had this. In fact, this might be my favorite combat of any Zelda game. It just is done so perfectly in this game, and Hyrule Castle is the perfect example of this. This is maybe one of my favorite parts of the entire game. You are met with this super colorful palette throughout the entire game, and then all of a sudden you are met with desaturated Hyrule, which just looks different. On top of unsettling music and enemies that are just frozen, it's really different compared to the rest of the game. Then you solve a little puzzle, pull the Master Sword, and get to watch this beautiful scene of the color all coming back, and then you get to see how powerful the Master Sword is by defeating all of these enemies. It's really cool, and definitely one of the highlights of this game. And something that I also want to bring up is the dungeons. They're just okay in this one. They're not like bad, but they're not necessarily great either. I would categorize all of them under the good column. I think that Tower of the Gods is probably the best dungeon in this game, but none of them really stand out, and a lot of people strike the dungeons in this game as being too easy. And while I don't really disagree, they are kind of simple compared to like Ocarina of Time, it really isn't that distracting, and I don't personally mind it too much. However, it is worth mentioning possibly the biggest con with this game, and that is the pacing. While the pacing is really nice at some points in this game, it isn't always perfect. For example, you start off in this beautiful outset island with a really good opening tutorial, and you're finally excited to use your sword in combat in the Forsaken Fortress, and then the sword's taken away from you and you are stuck with boring barrel sneaking. This is the lowest point of the game, and it is right at the beginning. This point sucks so much that when I've tried to get my friends to try and play this game, this is the point where they all quit because, well, this section is terrible. And it sucks that it has to be right at the beginning of the game as well. This really throws off the pacing, and it's just not fun. The second visit to the Forsaken Fortress is obviously much better, Even then, this dungeon did so much damage to the Wind Waker, and it really does suck that one bad dungeon can hurt a game this much. And trust me, we'll be talking about that with both Spirit Tracks and Phantom Hourglass. But in the case of the Wind Waker, it doesn't completely ruin the game, but it does serve as one of the top criticisms. And another thing that I'm going to complain about that some people might roll their eyes at, I really don't like the Triforce Shard collecting marathon that you have to do at the end. I know some people really like this as you can explore the world, but these are in like completely random locations and they are not easy to find at all. This is some Zelda 1 stuff and just not my thing. I understand it's about adventure and this really does set the tone for adventure, but a lot of these are just in the middle of the ocean. They're not just fun to find, and I get that you get treasure maps and stuff, but this just wasn't one of my favorite parts of the game, and honestly was something that also could have benefited from better pacing. The pacing is just completely thrown off in this game. Essentially, you'll have moments which are really awesome and a ton of fun, and then you followed up with sailing, which I gotta say, at least they were able to make the soundtrack in this game so good, because to be completely honest, if you were sailing for this long and that ocean theme wasn't so good, this game would be garbage. But it is good, it is entertaining, and the Wind Waker establishes itself as one of the best Zelda games. I also love Ganondorf in this game. His motivations are clear from the beginning, and also it's kind of a play on Ocarina of Time, and it's sort of perfect since this entire game is kind of playing off of Ocarina of Time. It is really nice to see, and definitely something that I loved about the Wind Waker, even though I really didn't think I was going to. Honestly, the Wind Waker is definitely one of my favorite games of all time, easily in my top 10. But it's not perfect. I, for one, am definitely able to acknowledge that. But I still enjoy so much of it even to this day. From the wonderful music, amazing story, even good villain motivations, this game really did a lot right, and definitely should go down in history as one of the best Zelda games of all time. And honestly, there's not much else to say about it. There's a lot of positives, there are a few negatives, but the Wind Waker is just solid, and I'm under the impression that most people on the internet believe this too, which is why I'm going to give The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker a 9 out of 10.